Hey there film fans, it's good to see you on this beautiful rainy day, the day before the apocalypse comes. I'm here to talk to you about The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Now if you've already seen The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey and you really loved it, then perhaps this isn't the review for you because I'm not going to be entirely complimentary. I do realise a lot of people went into this movie with very high expectations and some people will like it whatever because they really loved the world of Middle-earth. So this movie comes to us 75 years after the original publication of The Hobbit, and originally Guillermo del Toro was linked with the directing of the movie, but unfortunately he wasn't involved right to the end for one reason or another. So for those of you who aren't entirely familiar with the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, he didn't in fact copy the Harry Potter franchise. He came a long time before. The Hobbit was his prequel to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's a child's book and it's 310 pages long and it's quite, light and it's all about fairies and magic and all that. It's not half as deep and dark as the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, which is more aimed at adults. Now the first thing that you'll notice about this new movie is that it's part one of three. In the same vein, I guess, as Twilight's most recent movie, which was split into two parts. The final Harry Potter book was split into two movies. But considering how long those books are, that's even slightly more understandable. The Hobbit, that's 310 pages. That makes like a mere 103.3 pages per 3-hour movie. Well, obviously they've had to stick in a little bit of padding here and there. I personally haven't read The Hobbit the whole way through. I remember starting it and giving up at some point, partly because I found J.R.R. Tolkien's tone mildly patronising. So I can't be particularly precious about sticking to the original text. However, I found this movie, it was very obvious what was from the original book and what wasn't. Some of it really felt like filler. It certainly would be more inspired by it as opposed to based on. Just for example, and this I only know from research, there is a character that I found slightly irritating, which is that of the Brown Wizard of the Forest, who is kind of portrayed as a drugged up hippie kind of wizard. And I found him a bit disgusting because he's got birds nesting in his hair and he had bird poo all down the side of his face. Every time he was on screen, it just was like... Ugh. He apparently doesn't appear in The Hobbit at all and is only vaguely mentioned in any of Tolkien's work. I'll come back to that brown wizard later. For me, the only logic behind extending a short kids' book into three-hour behemoths of a movie franchise is for money, because obviously 3 movies will make more money than one. However, it might have come at the price of quality. Whatever you say, this movie will be compared to the 3 movies that came before it, which, whatever you think, they were a groundbreaking work of movie science fiction. And Jackson obviously really loved his source material at this point. And this movie does bring back some of our old favourites. We've got Gandalf the Grey, we've got a cameo by Elijah Wood, and a little Gollum played by the fabulous Andy Serkis might creep in at some point. There's also been a lot of pre-film publicity about this new 48 frame per second, as opposed to the normal 24 frame per second print that's been used on this film. It's also in 3D, which I'm never a great fan of. Now, I don't know if this is the weird new 48 frame per second rate thing or something else in the production, but it looks quite cheap. And this might be because it's so high definition now because of the extra frames that you can see all the fake noses and the fake beards. But somehow it just looks a bit like a kids' TV production, or to me it looks quite a lot like the old 80s movies like Labyrinth and The Never-Ending Story, that type of thing. When you consider the insanely large budget and some of the incredible set pieces, it comes out looking cheap and dated. It certainly looks older than the original Lord of the Rings movies, which came out 10 years ago. Really, technology should have pushed it forward as opposed to backwards. And okay, the Shire always did look a little bit funny, but now it really does look like Teletubby Land. Also, again, I don't know if this is down to the 48 frames per second thing or not, but some of the action sequences, particularly at the beginning of the movie, look as though they've been slightly fast-forwarded, which just doesn't look particularly high quality to me. Particularly this is noticeable when that naughty brown wizard is racing along trying to distract some orcs, I believe, on a sleigh pulled by bunny rabbits, and it just looks bad. Some of the bits that are added in are just tedious. You might remember the White Council from that trilogy, what came before. Well, they're back. We've got Sauron, we've got Kate Blanchet as that beautiful white fairy elf lady, which is interesting because in The Hobbit there are actually no female characters. Tut tut, sexist, J.R.R. Tolkien. But it just doesn't fit with this light-hearted kids movie type thing. It just makes it seem very boring and serious and quite tedious. I remember actually saying this bit's really boring. In general, there is this problem with tone. It doesn't quite know whether it is this kind of light-hearted kids movie or if it's kind of the next Lord of the Rings. It doesn't seem to quite have settled. Considering that in The Hobbit there's much less at stake than there is in The Lord of the Rings, it takes itself very seriously. But overall, it does have a slightly unfinished director's cut feel. It feels like someone didn't come in and say, no, this has to be shortened, this has to be made tighter. It just feels a bit baggy and confused. And on the subject of baggy, it takes forever to get going. The first 45 minutes are all set in Bilbo Baggins' Hobbit hole, played by Martin Freeman. I haven't even mentioned him, but he's quite good actually. But yeah, that just seems to plod along quite slowly. And it's also quite strange because the dwarves, in the book, I remember this bit, they sing a little song, and that seems really strange in the film. It just doesn't sit very well at all. Even when it does get going, some of the action sequences, and I'm not just talking about that brown rabbit now, they seem very strange. 3D movies have a habit of, I'm 3D, I can make things zoom and crash and come at the camera and zoom down there and woo, like a kind of theme park ride. And that is something that happens here. All through the movie, the dwarves seem to be falling from massive heights and landing completely safe, not even slightly broken in any way. It's ridiculous. But the thing that my friend pointed out is that they keep falling, and then 5 minutes later they're falling again. How? Are they must be at the bottom of the earth by the end of the movie. I don't understand it. They never seem to climb back up. And there is also a feeling that they will never get hurt in any way, so you have no real investment that there's any danger, despite it trying to be quite serious and scary in places. I guess we're kind of spoiled now as well, because we're used to seeing veteran British actors with beards on, being all majestic and magical. That's something we've seen quite a lot of, probably in the wake of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So I guess it's getting harder to impress us with that type of thing. However, there is also some funny, slapsticky, misplaced humour throughout this movie, which makes it even harder to take it seriously. Now, don't get me wrong, there are good bits. I think towards the end of the movie, it starts to find its feet and it seems to know where it's going a bit more. There's a really good sequence with Gollum, the riddles in the dark bits, and that just makes you think how good those first three movies were, really. But yes, it is truly exciting and it looks beautiful to watch, and the Gollum character really is quite emotive. There is this nagging worry that this might do to the Lord of the Rings franchise what the Phantom Menace and its next two did to the Star Wars franchise. And some might say it's lucky that Peter Jackson doesn't own the rights to the Silmarillion books yet, because goodness knows, I think after this we'll probably have had enough. Who knows, hopefully some kids will go to this movie and they'll really enjoy it, and I guess, that's probably who it's aimed at the end of the day anyway. But this feels very much a prequel to Jackson's trilogy, as opposed to J.R.R. Tolkien's, and it's certainly a major come down from what we've come to expect.